Welcome back to Fleshing It Out with Samantha Spittle, where we're tackling shame triggers, and this episode is tackling body image and appearance. Today, I am talking with mindset coach at Higher Good Coaching, Becky Upchurch. In our conversation, we talk about how to be happy with ourselves now instead of always living to make a change or always waiting for when this happens. And so whether body image and appearance is something that you struggle with or not, you can definitely get some great takeaways from her. So sit back and enjoy as we flesh it out. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. And
thank you for having me.
I remembered Well, I figure January is the perfect month for the shame trigger of body image and appearance because New year, new you, change your body. And my husband and I were just talking, like we got Chick-fil-A. And the first thing I said was like, oh, I feel like I should have made a better choice, but I just wanted the chicken and the French fries. And then he said, well, it's that time of year. I go, yeah, but so is the summer. The summer was that time of year. And then this was that time of year. And so then when January rolls around, that's really the good time of year that we buckle down and then we get into get your body beach ready and all that crap. Right. And
one of my favorite memes is the one that's like, dear summer, you will take whatever body I bring you. Love me. And I'm like, exactly.
Exactly. Because everybody is a beach body because everybody can go to the beach. So
exactly.
I have to tell myself that. But I want to jump into your brain. I want you to share all of your wisdom because as a coach and, mindset being your thing. And we talked on our pre-interview about, having a unique mindset when it comes to body image and whatnot. And so I'd love to hear more about that from you. And then also what I've been thinking of is because we're thinking of combating these messages in the new year and change, everything is change. My personal question, and I imagine I'm not alone, is getting to a healthy place now, regardless of weight and size and health and things like that, and being able to be happy, confident, all those things regardless. So that's kind of where my mindset is, but I would love to go. I'm on this journey with you. So I'd love to hear some of your mindset. So jump in and start and tell us, like I said, kind of who you are and why you have this unique perspective.
All right. So who I am, I feel like that's always the $1 million question. So obviously professionally, I'm a clarity and mindset coach and trainer and speaker. Personally, I'm somebody who tries to be a good human and help people make their lives better. And I'm a dog mom and all that fun stuff. I think for me, one of the reasons that I have become so passionate about body image is I feel like I've done a lot of learning in the past few years around things like intuitive eating and health at every size. And I'm certainly not an expert, but it was oddly during the pandemic, I got into podcasts for the first time. I was never really somebody who listened to podcasts. And I was like, where has this been my whole life? Like, oh, this is like what everybody else in the world had been doing. And some of the podcasts I got into were around like diet and health and wellness. But it was interesting. I don't remember how I stumbled onto it, but there was a podcast. It's called Dietitians Unplugged. And it's not an active podcast anymore, but they have a ton of episodes. And it's these two dietitians who are in larger bodies and their focus is not on weight loss and it's on health. And they talk a lot about, research around weight and health and the relationship between those two things. And I feel like a lot of where their podcast has led me to through different experts they have that I've now followed and other things that I found. Just a lot of new perspectives because I feel like I grew up kind of conflating weight and health, even though I know from personal experience, those two things are not necessarily associated with each other per se. And I'll tell you a funny story about that if you remind me to tell you the spree story. But I don't want to delve into that right now because then I'll get off on a squirrel tangent. But so the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I feel like I I'm in my 40s and I'm learning things that I'm like, why didn't I know this 20 years ago? Why didn't I know this 30 years ago? Why didn't I know this before I spent like more than half of my life dieting and trying to change my body, not realizing like the harm I was probably doing, not only to my body and to my health, but to my mental well-being and self-esteem and what I was modeling for other people. And so I'm kind of in this place now where when I see people who are struggling with body image issues, it's like I have this, it's like a weird reaction that is simultaneously like sadness and empathy for the space that they are in because I know it so well. And then also just frustration and anger that they're in that space. And that we as a society, and I think specifically with women, it's like we have normalized this so much that no matter, like, I feel like you can take a woman and whether she's in a larger body or a smaller body or a stereotypical fit body, I guarantee you, she can tell you everything that's wrong with her body. And to me, that's just like absolutely heartbreaking. And I remember reading something, I think it was like a couple of years ago. And again, you know, these things that come up on social media that just kind of hit you right where it hurts. And it was something to the effect of like, if, you know, women spend as much time doing, you know, whatever it was, you know, as much time doing this as they did trying to change their bodies, like they could solve all the problems of the world. It's like we could cure world hunger and we could like, you know, but it's like, when you really think about it, like how much time and energy, I know for me, like how much time and energy in my life have I spent counting calories, entering information into apps to tell me how much more I can eat or whether I need to exercise. And it's like, oh my gosh, how much of my life like just have I wasted on things that have gotten me nowhere? And so I'm fortunate in, you know, I think this is true of a lot of people who work in the coaching industry. I think sometimes when you're a coach, you seek out the wisdom of other coaches, you work with other coaches. And I've been very fortunate to get perspective from other people as well, because, you know, I feel like nobody's journey is a journey of themselves. It's a journey of everybody who's around them.
Oh, that's so good. No one's journey is a journey of themselves. It's what did you say? It's a
journey with everybody around them.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. That's so good.
Thank you. But I think that's, you know, part of like when I think about my own growth experience, it's like I can look at people and be like, oh, I learned this from this person, or this person modeled this for me. You know, and so I think it's hard when people like, you know, want it to talk about your expertise. And it's like, well, all of our expertise is built on other people's expertise. It's like, you know, I tell people all the time, there's nothing new in the world. It's just, there's a collection of knowledge and we learn it at different times from different people.
You just described like fleshing it out, like my thing with fleshing it out, where I'm like, I want to take everyone's stuff and be like, here, because I get so much from people. And it's like, it's too much for me to try to like pass on. So it's like, yes. And then you have, I mean, that's the beauty of connection, because then you're listening to those podcasts and then you can kind of filter through kind of the nuggets so that someone else who listens to this can get those nuggets in a collection. So I think that's the secret to community and, you know, what we're all doing.
You know, I always tell people, like, because I've worked with men, but I market specifically to women, you know, and I tell people all the time, I feel like women collectively, if they put their time and energy to it, it's like, there's nothing that we can't achieve. And so I think that's also part of the frustration when I see people, it's like they get sidetracked on where they feel like they're lacking or where they feel like they're not measuring up to some standard that it's really kind of arbitrary and created by people who didn't necessarily have any expertise. So it's like, why do we even care what they have to say? And so I think the thing that I kind of, you know, it took me, I feel like my whole life to figure out, and even though my lived experience kind of told me otherwise, I think many of us have this idea that like, oh, if I just hit this weight goal, or I just hit this fitness goal, then it's like the thing is going to happen. Even if we can't articulate what the thing is, it's just like life will just magically get better. It's like, oh, there's like the heavens will open up. And as somebody who, years ago, I was in a larger body and then I lost 75 pounds. And like, do certain things change? Yes. I think some of that is because we live in a society that is very fat phobic, unfortunately. But it's like, you just find new things to not like. You find new things to pick apart about yourself. Because again, I feel like we're socialized to find flaws. We're socialized to not look at ourselves and be like, oh, I look really good today, because, God forbid you be arrogant. I'm also, just in terms of, that question of like, who am I? I'm somewhat of a rebel. I feel like there's this part of me, I get it from my father, who is just kind of, has a little ornery streak in me. And so I think some of it is just rebellion, that I feel like women are taught, like, to make their bodies smaller. I think it was the We Can Do Hard Things podcast, I think, that Glennon Doyle was talking about. Women are taught to stay small, stay small, stay small. And that includes their physical being. It's like, there's so much pressure to like, stay small, don't use your voice, don't, and how counterproductive that is to like achieving things in the world and making a contribution. And so really having the realization that we spend all of this time and energy on kind of the wrong things, and it keeps us from doing the right things. And we're focused on the wrong things because we think it's going to give us something that's not ever coming. It's like, oh, I want to lose weight so that I can like myself. And again, through the benefit of having worked with other coaches, there's a coach that I follow, and she talks about, it's like, but what if you could just like yourself now? Like, what if you could save yourself all of the other crap? And the answer is you can.
Yes. That is it. Because for my personal journey, I've also lost weight, gained weight, lost weight, gained weight. And similar to you, like big chunks of weight 2 times in my life, big chunks of weight, kept it off for a few years, kind of slowly came on. And then I think fast came on, and especially the last 2 years. And it's like, all these Facebook memories keep popping up. Now that I have Facebook, the first time it was real pictures I had to look through, but now Facebook has journeyed with me over the last, 12 years, and pictures pop up and I look and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 80 pounds less there than I am now probably. And I remember thinking all the negative thoughts in those pictures. And I'm grateful for these pictures that keep popping up, because I saw the pattern where it was like every single picture. I remember taking the picture and fearing, worrying about what I looked like and, being critical and all this stuff. And so here I am again, and now I'm at the heaviest I've been. And it's like, I want to feel healthy. I want to get up off the couch, like without struggling, that's like a fitness thing. But I don't want to hate my taking pictures. I don't want to avoid living my life. I don't want to immediately after, when I look at it, think, oh, because I know now that I'm going to have that feeling if I lose the weight, for maybe a little while, I'll say I'll be on that high, but I'll be right back down to those thoughts. So how do we get there now? Like, how can we move towards that healthy mindset now without focusing on the stuff that we know is not going to get us there?
Yeah. And I think that's the $1 million question. And I am going to answer that in my experience and to the best of my ability. But I think that's kind of where that unique perspective comes in. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day who was trying to lose weight. And they made a joke about, because I said, well, maybe you need an accountability partner, because they were talking about something they were going through. And then later they said something to me about, well, maybe you need an accountability partner. And I said, well, I'm not trying to lose weight. They were joking around about something else. But it was an interesting conversation, because I think people automatically assume, and this is why I say, I think this somewhat makes me unique, is I think most people see people in larger bodies and they assume, oh, that person is probably trying to lose weight, because that's just what we do. And it's the idea that at the end of the day, and I'll kind of go over this, and it's a coaching model that is very common among coaches. Different people frame it different ways, but it's the idea that our experience is shaped by the thoughts that we choose to have. So the idea that something happens and we choose how we want to think about that. And I always like to use the example of somebody getting fired from their job. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's really easy to be like, oh, that's a terrible situation. Like that would happen. And of course, I'm going to have negative thoughts about it. Well, not necessarily. Like you and I could work the same company and we could both get fired on the same day or laid off on the same day. And I could leave being like, this is the worst news ever. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then that thought is going to create feelings of despair and fear and scarcity. And then those feelings then cause me to act in certain ways. And then those actions lead me to a result. Yes. You may be having a very different experience because you might get laid off and think, I have been waiting for a sign that it was time to leave this job. And I just received the sign, thank you, God, universe. Now I know it's time for me to start my own business. The sign I wanted is here. My feeling is I'm excited, I'm confident, I'm feeling ready. That's going to drive certain actions. That's going to give me certain results. So it's the idea that what happens to us is not the determiner of our result. It's how we choose to think about what's happening. And so again, this model is called different things by different people, but it's the idea that your thought leads to your feeling, which leads to your actions, which leads to the result that you create for yourself. So with something like weight loss, looking at it as if my thought is constantly, I need to lose weight. What is that creating for me? Or if I'm looking in the mirror thinking, I hate my body, what kind of feelings is that going to create for me? I know in my personal experience, that has never brought me any positive feelings. It's always made me feel bad about myself. I felt like I'm not attractive. I'm not good enough. Well, when you feel unattractive, when you feel like you're not good enough, when you feel like there is something wrong with you, what kind of action does that lead to? Does it lead to choices that are good for your health? Does it lead you to things that make you feel good? Does it lead you to showing up as your best self in community with others? Generally, those negative, crappy thoughts are going to lead to negative, crappy outcomes. But if I can choose to think more positive things about myself, then that's going to shift not just what I'm thinking, but it's going to shift how I'm feeling about myself, the actions I'm taking, and the results I'm getting. So that's kind of a very, very simple way to explain what is actually a very complex coaching model that can be used in a lot of different ways. But I think that's important to just kind of frame the conversation.
Yeah, no, I like that. I was writing down the thoughts, the feelings. It's one of those things that I feel like we see. It's a quote we see on, Instagram, social media, like our thoughts determine our feelings, determine our actions, results. So it's like, it's one of those things. It's the classic, like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. But where do we go with that? Because when you were talking, and I want to throw this out, but we can put a pin in it too, is that I started thinking of my own journey and thinking, okay, in the past, and like I said, I feel like I've only really lost weight twice, sort of a third. I lost a little bit a couple of years ago when I thought I was starting to gain and kind of reeled it in. It was that like, I got like in a positive mindset, and then I started to see results, and that led me to feeling better. So I was thinking I applied everything that you just described to my previous weight loss journey. So it feels like a success, but something was off though, because that didn't last. It kind of, when I was in that zone of positivity, it was working. But why is it then when I saw these pictures pop up on Facebook, I remember that day feeling so horrible. Right. So, and it's not, something's not true in there. So,
and it's because we're thinking that the circumstance of, I'm getting a smaller body or my weight is the thing that's causing the thought. And it's actually not. It's we can choose to think whatever we want to think. And this is the part where, and again, this gets a little bit more in depth, but it's the idea of, I can look at my body and I can choose whatever thought I want to choose about my current body, which seems a little crazy if you're somebody who's used to looking in the mirror and thinking, I hate my body. So stay with me for a second. I
know. Take me on this journey. Take me on this journey.
Yeah. So this is, I'm going to rewind for a second, because I don't know if you're someone who does affirmations. And if anybody is listening to this and loves affirmations, stay through the whole thing. Don't just like stop as soon as I say this first part and get offended and upset. But a long time ago, I hated affirmations. And the reason I hated them is because I loved them in theory, because they sounded amazing. Like you just practice these words and then they come true. And I was like, this is so amazing. And I'm seeing all these people that are like, I do affirmations every morning and now my life is amazing. And it's like, really? Because I do affirmations and I still feel like crap. And so it was like, I felt like, why is this like working for other people? It doesn't work for me. And it was a point of frustration. And then I realized it was because I would like pick, random affirmations that were other people, so they weren't personalized. And then I had this epiphany, again, working with a coach on something kind of related, but, and they were talking about the idea of taking baby steps, because a lot of times what we do when we try to shift our perspective is we try to shift our perspective from like all the way on this side to all the way on this side. And the way that our brains are wired, I just don't think that that's possible. Because if you're like, if I've spent 20 years looking in the mirror and thinking, I hate my fat body, and I start practicing, I love my fat body every day, my brain, every time I say those words, is going to be like, no, you don't. No, you don't.
Liar. Right. That is a lie.
So I'm never going to be able to move forward. But if I can go to a place of neutrality, and again, this is something, there's a coach named Cara Lowenthal. She's from a different type of coaching background. She's a very well-known coach, and she talks about, she's had a lot of success. She does a lot of work with body confidence, and she's a woman who lives in a larger body, and that she would, say something like, this is a human stomach. That was her neutral thought. Something like that might not resonate with me. Like for me, it would be something like, I think when I first started working on like body image thoughts, I think I started with something to the effect of like, some people find people in larger bodies attractive, or something like that. And it's really kind of taking that extreme of like larger bodies are terrible, and like, what's the next little baby step forward that I can say, and my brain is like, oh yeah, I can believe that. Because even if in my mind, I think I'm not attractive because I'm in a larger body, I can be like, but you know what? There have been guys who like my larger body, or I have friends in larger bodies who are attractive, and, whatever, or there's celebrities in larger bodies who are famous and successful and well-liked, so it's like, what is it, something that I can believe and get behind? Okay, well, that's the thought that I'm going to practice. That's the thing that I'm going to ingrain in my mind to move me a little bit further away from that really negative thought and a little bit closer to that positive one.
I think that's such a huge thing. It feels so small, baby step, thing. But, it's funny because my background with, being in, entrepreneurship and sales and, anything where you have to hustle on your own, it's all so much mindset work. And so I feel similar journey with affirmations. Like, I know they're good, but it's like going from, how do I go from, if I'm being honest, like a struggle I have is like hating my body. I want to be like this positive person that has, but at the end of the day, I struggle a lot with some internal stuff. And so to go from that hate to, I love my body, it just like, that is not working. So I love the practical tips of the baby steps. And I can't think what it's called. But I got it was about affirmations, but it said, instead of making the statement, you ask yourself a question like, why am I, like when you're trying to celebrate the things that you like about yourself, or that you are working towards those baby steps. It's like you ask a question like, I don't think this is right. I have to like research it more, but it's like, why do I appreciate my body today? And your brain starts filling in to answer those questions, because your brain likes, things to be complete. And that helped me. Like, I feel like it's along the same lines of baby steps, where it's, instead of it being something huge where you automatically shut down, it's just, how can we get to those little steps to move us? So I think that's a really powerful tip.
And And I love that you touched on the fact that the baby steps don't feel like you're doing very much, because this is something that comes up a lot, and not just in body image. And I talk about this all the time. I was just talking about this last weekend. I do a Saturday morning mindset room on Clubhouse. And one of the things that comes up a lot is people get stuck. I'm stuck on my goals. How do I move forward? Or I don't know how to get traction on this thing. I have this plan. And I always tell them, make it as small as possible so that you can actually do it. And then that's how you do it. And then you keep doing it. And that's how you move forward. And with something like this, it's easy to say, oh, I want to feel better. I want to love my body. But I remember years ago, a friend of mine who had struggled with his weight, his approach to weight loss, which I now have kind of commandeered and have applied to like other areas of my life, not weight loss. His thing was, if it took me, 30 years to gain all this weight, it's not going to take me 3 days to lose it. And it's the same kind of concept. If I've been telling myself, if I have, spent 20, 30 years learning to hate my body, unfortunately, I'm not going to learn to love it in a week, right? It is going to take time, but the best way to invest that time is through those baby steps, as opposed to like, I'm trying to believe things I don't believe. I'm fighting with my brain. And, our brains look for evidence of, like you were saying, it's like our brain likes to close the loop. So if I'm like, my body's terrible, or people in larger bodies are not attractive, I'm going to look for proof that that's true, as opposed to, if I'm believing something that's more positive, it's like, oh, if I want to tell my brain, like, there are women in larger bodies that are in great relationships, or there are women in larger bodies who are fashion models. Well, I can find evidence of those things, so whatever kind of that trigger is, because I know for some people, it's not just about, oh, I don't like my body. It's, I don't like my body because I think it will affect, whether I can be in a romantic relationship, or whether my partner is still attracted to me. Or it might be, I don't want to be in a larger body because in my peer group, I don't want to be the larger person, or I feel like it's going to impact me in my work. So I feel like there's so many other things that we attach to our physical appearance. Not even necessarily just the size of our body. And I think that's another reason that I'm so kind of passionate about this, because I think there's a lot of, I don't think there's truth to those things, but I think there are some real fears at play, because if I'm somebody who looks around and says, oh, I look at what it's like to live in a larger body. If somebody's lived in a smaller body and a larger body and has had different experiences, for example, with medical professionals, where it's assumed that if you're in a larger body, you're less healthy. And I always love to kind of share, and I'll share the story. I mentioned it earlier, the spree story, because I think it's such a perfect example. So when I was at my smallest adult weight, I feel like I had lost about 75 pounds. And I feel like people, would say like how good I looked and give me such positive affirmation. Because I think the assumption is, oh, you're in a smaller body, so you are making healthier choices for yourself.
And you must be happy. All your problems are solved. So we're going to celebrate that.
Yeah, life is great. Yep. Life is great. Yeah, everything's wonderful. And I just remember one night going home from work, and I was, calorie counting to lose weight, because I was like, oh, it's all a math equation. I'm good at math. And I remember going home, and I think I had like 600 calories left for the day that I could eat. And I remember I'm a sugar person. I'll be a sweets. I love sweets. Anybody who knows me knows, like, I eat candy, like it's my job sometimes. It's my downfall. But so I got home, and I love spree candy. And so I would have like boxes of spree candy in my house. And I sat down, and I happened to know how many calories were in spree candy. So I counted out 600 calories worth of spree candy and put them in a bowl and ate them for dinner. Without hesitation, without question about, is this a healthy choice? And just the fact that my mindset was so much on, I just have to hit the number so I can be in the smaller body. It wasn't about, is this healthy? What is the impact this is having on my health, on my teeth,
my blood sugar levels.
Right. And I look back and I think about like that period of time and I'm trying to remember like I struggle to remember if I ever ate a vegetable other than
Yeah.
like potatoes. Um, and so to me, to look back on that and think, wow, like when I was in my smallest ever adult body, I can remember eating candy for dinner and I struggle to remember eating vegetables. And yet, like, I can think about like being at my largest adult weight and eating vegetables every day and getting out and walking for an hour and a half, you know. So I think just the idea of, as I've gotten older, realizing that a lot of the stereotypical learning, I'm trying to unlearn because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And again, I'm certainly not an expert on, you know, health. But I follow a lot of, you know, dietitians and intuitive eating counselors and, you know, people who work in the fields where they're talking about there is research around, you know, you can be in a larger body and still make healthy choices. Because I think sometimes we make the assumption that if somebody's in a larger body, they don't know how to make healthy choices or they don't choose to do things for their health. And you know I used to run and I remember when I first got into running and I was, you know, in a fairly large body and I was in running groups with women who were well over 200 pounds, who were marathon runners. And, you know, so for somebody to say like, oh, you can't necessarily do all of these things, because I think that's part of it too, is there's this narrative that many of us have that because I look a certain way or because I'm at a certain body weight, I can't do certain things or I'm limited in my choices. And certainly sometimes that's true if there's like health situations at play, but just because somebody's in a larger body doesn't mean they can't go exercise. It doesn't mean they don't eat vegetables. It doesn't mean, so I think just a lot of that stigma that's at play is always a source of frustration for me. And so that's why I tell stories like the spree story. I feel like this is the first time I will have shared it publicly. But I've had, you know, conversations with people where I've shared that story because to me, that is like the perfect analogy for like, you can be doing things to shrink your body because you think it's going to make you feel better. And there are things that are terrible for your health. And how many of us get to that point where it's like, we're so hyper focused on the physical appearance. We're so hyper focused on that goal that we think is going to create that magic that we don't take the time to think the big picture.
And you brought up a couple things that made me think. So one, you said, you know, I'm no expert. And I think, yes, there's people that specialize in all these things that if we're ready to dig deeper, that's a great place to go. But what I love about touching on all these shame triggers though, is that there's so much stuff that we carry around, you know, this crap basically. And especially when it comes to our body image and appearance. And it's the lived experience. And that if you're willing to speak on it, like there's a difference, I think, between, you know, the expert advice and things like that. And those can be great tidbits. I mean, obviously that's great education and that helps all of us. And I want to, you know, dig into that too. But I think just having some of like the spree story, like those are the kind of things that, you know, for me, when I was younger, I counted like carbs. That was for me. Like when I was in high school, I was very, you know, I've got this many left. And then when I did it the second time, I thought I think I was in a healthier space of like eating and just kind of whole foods and whatnot. So it's funny because you have your spree story. And for me, I have this struggle with complimenting people's bodies because I don't want to encourage this stuff. And my mom had said something that actually really helped my perspective. We had a family friend who had lost weight. And she said, you know, she was at an event with her and everyone was complimenting her. And my mom said, you know, I told her I thought she looked great before she lost the weight. And, you know, she looks great now. And it's something that I didn't realize that I'm so grateful my mom said that, because even though I still struggle with my weight and my body image and all that stuff, I just think of her saying that as like a genuine thing, that she looked great before. And I know I've said that to friends, but it's like, why can't I internalize that for myself? So your tips of like the baby steps is so important. But I remember when I was in high school and I'd lost weight, and of course I'm 17 at the time, so I want the compliments and stuff, so I go, that's any age, right? So I go to my parents' hometown in South Dakota. And of course, I'm like 17, just dropped 50 pounds, like feeling amazing. Yep. Look at me. And I remember, either if people didn't really comment, they didn't really care if I lost weight or not. They only saw me once a year. They're not really that worried about my body. So I remember someone didn't say anything and they left. And my mom said, so-and-so asked if you were sick, like if you had cancer or something. And I was like, why would they think that? Like, why didn't they tell me how good I looked? I didn't say that out loud, but internally I was thinking, and I thought, oh my gosh, like I'm so obsessed with my weight. I forget that people struggle, that there could be a million reasons why, and that they did me such a favor by not complimenting me because, even if I had something, that's a whole other layer of things. But yeah, if I had been sick and, oh, you look great. It's like, thanks. I have, an eating disorder and you're just pumping up. And I'm learning so much about, I think that for me, eating disorders, it's anorexia and bulimic. That's all. And I'm not anorexic or bulimic, so I don't have an eating disorder. And the more I've looked, that's why I like that term disordered eating, because I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely think of foods as good, bad, how much is of this and all of that. More of that. And so I'm like, here I thought like, oh, I'm immune to all those problems. I don't have those problems. I'm just emotional, like, or I'm just, going through a hard season or something, but it's like, no, there's definitely more going on there. So those are like those random tidbits that just kind of weave through our life and kind of, I don't know, kind of become the lessons, but also sometimes the lifelines to give us those moments of like hope or awareness. I didn't realize at the time that those were really solid, with could it be tied to my health? And then my mom's, look good at any size. Like those two things have just stuck with me. And even though, like I said, I struggle, I kind of almost use them as anchors to like pull me back to where I want to be, like that healthy mindset I want to have.
Well, and first of all, I love your mom. Yeah. Say that. And yeah, I'm very, sometimes I feel a little bit of guilt because when people are celebrating weight loss and people are like, oh, you look so good, I'm the person who's not saying anything. Because to me, it's just not in integrity with my beliefs to champion someone's weight loss. That said, like, I'm a coach and I work with clients and sometimes people want to lose weight. It's not up to me to decide what their goals are. So I'm going to support them. And, certainly if they ask for my opinion or, I'm happy to share thinking, but like I had one of my, I think it was my first ever unsolicited testimonial was from a client who was talking about how I helped her change her life. And it was because she had like health and fitness goals, which was great. And I think part of that, may have been weight loss. I can't remember. It's been, years now, but, there's always kind of that part that like pulls on my heartstrings of like, but you don't have to lose weight. Like you can love yourself now. And I think that's the thing, just having, because it's something where it can feel so far away. And I want to preface this by saying, like, I am not saying like I am the epitome of like body confidence and I don't have body issues. Like I will always have body issues, like, because I started having body issues. I remember being a child and there was a member of my family who every time we would go to visit, their first question, and from the time I was like, I want to say elementary school, like a small child and just a little chubby, how's your diet going? So this has been ingrained in me for a very long time from various places, including my own brain. And so I feel like there will always be work there. There will always be space for growth. And so I share that because I think it's important for people to realize that like, just because those feelings are still there doesn't mean you can't make progress or that you haven't made progress. Sometimes it's like we like fall back into old patterns and then we're like, oh, see, I'm still broken, or, and that's not how it works. That said, I think, really kind of committing to, if I want to change my mindset with where I am right now, and I want to commit to, finding thoughts that I can practice to help me build my confidence and finding ways to look for evidence that people in larger bodies are more, are attractive, or just as desirable or whatever it is. One of the pieces of advice that I had gotten was cultivate your social media feed and look at who's in your social media feed. And one of the things that I had in my social media feed, because I've, been into yoga since I was in my late teens, early 20s, I had a lot of people who did yoga in my social media feed that I had just discovered from various places, not people that I know people in real life who are yoga teachers, but these were just internet people that I'd come across or whatever. And I remember going through and thinking, these are all people in very small bodies. And what message is that subliminally sending me? And so I went through and I cultivated on purpose, like certain things in my social media feed. If you don't follow Lizzo, if you want to talk about somebody who is like body confident, like you would not believe, Lizzo. Just gonna put that out there.
By the way, I did the same thing. I've been intentionally cultivating healthier, more diverse. I love what you say about how you say larger bodies. I'm in a larger body because I've been struggling with that, with how to not demonize,
And finding what is that specific thought that's going to help you kind of build that confidence. And it's really tapping into when I'm practicing whatever that baby step thought is, getting in touch with what is the feeling that it's bringing up in me. And being able to dig into, is that the feeling that's going to help me to take the actions and create the things I want to create, and feel more confident and better about myself. And I love that you mentioned the reel, because I just saw one the other day and it was the same thing. It was a woman in a much larger body than the man who was with her. And it's like, her piece says like, something about being heavy, and then his says likes to lift heavy things, and he picks her up and carries her. But that's something as well. And I think that actually has also been part of my journey, is just, I feel like growing up, and I was joking around with this recently with a friend of mine. Growing up, I feel like it was like kind of ingrained in my brain through society and the things you see on movies and TV about like, men love thin women and men love women who look a certain way. And then I started, like, as I would get older and I would was in the, the dating realm, and guys would comment on things. It was so fascinating to me, because the things that men would comment on the most about me were like things about my body that I liked the least, like my hips and my butt. And it became kind of a running joke, and I joke around all the time, but I'm like, there are very few men that I've met in my life who don't like a woman with a big old booty. And so even sometimes that can be the thought, like a lot of men like a big old booty. And I wonder,
there's in the last, however many years, thick thighs and butts have been glorified more, which I'm like, thank goodness, because I spent my teen years in the 90s. And that's when the low rise jeans were there. I mean, no matter how thin I am, I will never, I could wear low rise jeans because I can wear whatever I want. But the way they were worn in the 90s, where they were just above your pelvic, area, that wasn't happening for me. So of course it's like failure. But I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, if more of the body images that were portrayed today were portrayed then, I wonder how I would have felt about myself. I wonder what could have changed. And it's not too late to change, just because I've had these for, almost 40 years, it doesn't mean that we can't shift the thoughts.
And I will say to anybody who is kind of like listening and thinking like, I just don't see it happening. Like, if you had told me like 5 years ago that we would be having this conversation, or that I would so I had an experience probably like a year and a half ago, and it is hilarious to me. I don't remember where I was going or what I was doing, but I was in the bathroom and I went to leave and I turned to the side. I think I was like drying my hands, and I turned to the side and it was a mirror. And so I could see like my side view from the mirror. And I just remember looking at myself in the mirror and literally saying to myself, wow, my ass looks great.
Yes.
Like, and in that moment, it was like, wait,
I had a positive thought about myself.
Like, Like I literally just looked at, I was like, "Ooh, look at my butt! Like
Yes.
it's so good." And I was laughing because I ended up, I think, like a couple of days later, I was in a networking group and I was telling people that story because at the time I said to the group of people, I said, "I guarantee you, I'm probably the largest person in this room." And I said, "And I'm probably the only one who's looked in the mirror anytime recently and thought about how great their butt looked."
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was pretty much like, "Yeah," and just having that realization that like, and it was something I never would have thought. But again, I think it was the byproduct of practicing that acceptance and practicing the thoughts that helped me to like see the positives and to be open to the fact that like, oh, I don't have to have like a little tiny butt. Like I can embrace the way that I look and the fact that, you know, even though I have kind of this years and years of, different perspective, that my perspective can in fact shift. And trust me, if that can happen for me, I feel like it can happen for anyone.
And I love that you shared that because you shared something in the beginning about we have normalized the conversation about criticizing our body. You get any group of women together and the way they can bond is by criticizing their body. And I think that you meant when we mentioned cultivating our social media feed, it starts to change that conversation. And I think for me, it's like hearing you say, when we had our pre-interview, you talked about, being in a group of women and that the women in the smaller bodies were complaining. And you realized, and correct me if this isn't exactly, it's just how I remembered it, but it was like, you realized you had so much more body confidence than they did because of the issues. And it's like, I think there's this part, at least for me, where it's like, if you can have body confidence being in a larger body, Lizzo can have confidence being in a larger body. Like I can have confidence in a larger body. And it's like a gift. I mean, without sounding corny, like the gift that keeps on giving. But I think honestly, it's like, instead of passing around this toxic hate for our body and where that it becomes normalized to always criticize. Like, what if we normalize saying nice things about our body? And I think I've told this story before, but I went on a bachelorette like beach week when I was, this is like early 20s. But my friend whose wedding it was, her and her girlfriends had this rule and they called it brown cow. I don't know why, but it was a rule that if you criticized your body in some way, you had to buy everyone a round of drinks. And me being a poor, broke person, like that wasn't going to happen. And it's like, I get by, like one of my big coping mechanisms is self-deprecating humor. And I thought, oh, I'm just making a joke because I feel tension inside. And if I just make a joke about my body, I'll feel better. And I realized after that week, and of course I have not followed this, but I wanted to make so many negative comments about my body, but I couldn't because I didn't want to buy drinks. And after a couple of days, it was like, oh, we're sitting on the beach. I'm being total critical about my body. I'm looking at all the flaws. I'm, everything, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. And the weirdest thing started happening. Like I got up and I walked to the beach and I didn't tell anyone how insecure I was. I just did it. And I remember thinking like, could you imagine if life was like this? If I could just live in this body and this was it? Why didn't I hold on to that lesson?
Right?
Exactly.
Bring that feeling back. It's interesting because I was actually at the gym the other day and I was in the locker room. I'd gone to the pool. And so I was in the locker room and I was changing. And I always have kind of it's always an interesting, it's like an internal dialogue with myself because I feel like when you're in public spaces, I try to be mindful of other people and other people's comfort levels, especially if they have like children with them, et cetera, et cetera. But I had this moment where I thought about like, what if we were all just very confident in our appearance and not feeling shame around our bodies and not feeling like, we have to like cover up every inch of ourselves. And then even like walking to the pool, we have to make sure we're wrapped up in a towel. Like one of the things that I do, it's very strange, but I don't actually go into the pool area with a towel. I leave the towel in the locker. Like I have like a shower towel. I don't have like a towel that I use after the pool. And so I am walking into the pool and out of the pool
just in your bathing suit,
uncovered except for just in my bathing suit. And I think for a lot of people, that would probably be super, super uncomfortable. But that's like a perfect example of like a baby step to help normalize just becoming comfortable with your own body. And I will share, hopefully, if any of my siblings are listening to this, hopefully they won't send this to my mother because she'll be like, wait, what? So years ago, I was part of a women's group and I was invited to go to this spa. And it was a spa where part of the spa you're dressed, and then part of the spa you are in a women's only area where you are actually not allowed to wear clothing. And I remember when I first heard about it, I was like, yeah, that's not something I'm doing, which is interesting because I've never really had issues around nudity. I think it was more I had issues with my own body and nudity. And strangers and people that knew me, and I don't want them to like see me and judge me, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I was part of this community. And so I was included in this event. And I remember going, and it was like such a fascinating experience because the people I was with, there was such a body diversity and such a diversity of backgrounds and perspectives. And it really helped me to feel comfortable. And I remember the first time I went to the pool after that, it was like I was walking through the pool area, like shoulders back, like head up, and I was wearing a bathing suit, but it was like, if I could be in like the naked place, like then I can be in this bathing suit. And it was like the most confident I'd ever felt in a bathing suit. And mind you, I grew up as a swimmer as a kid. So I spent a lot of my life in a bathing suit, but it was like such a fascinating experience to kind of like push me out of my comfort zone to help me feel comfortable. And again, everybody's comfort zone is different. Everything that's going to push you out is different. But yeah, I would say like, if you're somebody who's like, I don't even like walking in my bathing suit without being wrapped in a towel, or I don't even like to swim in a pool without swim shorts or a tank top, take that first step, right? Take the swim shorts off, just wear like a normal swim bottom, like whatever it is that's going to get you there. But I think you'd be surprised if you're willing to put yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone, what that can actually yield for you.
If you're listening, then I was like flipping out because the story you just told, I could tell the exact same story. I went to Spa World with some BFFs and it was after I'd had my son, which was at my then heaviest, but I'm heavier now, but at my then heaviest. And exactly. More to love now. And so we were going for a girls' day. One had been, and I was like, I'm going to do it. It's so outside my comfort zone. And I was uncomfortable the whole time, not unsafe, uncomfortable, just, like out of like, oh my gosh, it's so, I felt so awkward. But after that, putting a bathing suit on, like being able to cover part of my body, I was like, oh my gosh, I will go anywhere in a bathing suit. But yet once again, lost that because at my heaviest, I'm naked. After that, I'm feeling like I can wear a bathing suit. I have this body confidence. Then I start losing weight. I get down to my thinnest. And what did I wear all those years? A swim skirt because, my thighs. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what the hell? And then I, swim leggings, but it actually is a sun thing too. I do like to be covered because my legs, but I went to the beach this summer and I just wore just the bathing suit, no skirt, no nothing. And I walked to the ocean and I was sharing it with my husband and the other couple we were with when the kids were off playing. I was like, that was a big deal for me. I was telling them how everything in my head was, be who you needed when you were younger and just own it. And I had to give myself this whole pep talk, but I did it. And that was just so like, I have got to work this crap out now because I've already proven to myself that it doesn't magically go away. So
I was just gonna say, I love you saying, like thinking about, if you're somebody listening who has children or children in your life, or even just, who you kind of want to be in the world and how you want to show up and model for others. And that was kind of what was going through my mind the other day when I was in the locker room at the gym was, how many of the little kids who are coming in for swim lessons are used to seeing like women who are all wrapped up until they like get to the very edge of the pool. And, how quickly is that ingrained? And again, because I remember, my own childhood, like learning, at such a young age that like, oh, I'm chubby and somebody's asking me about my diet before I'm even out of elementary school. So really thinking about, what are kind of our motivators, not just for like, I want to feel more confident, but like, what is the impact I want to have? Like, what's the impact I want to have on my friends to help them love their bodies more, on my children or my friends' children, or, whoever it might be. And then the other piece of it, you kind of touched on that it's something that kind of ebbs and flows. And I think that, that's a normal part of the process. But I also think that's where it's like speaks to the opportunities for consistency. So like if you find those practice thoughts, having a practice that you can practice regularly. So I tell people all the time, I will actually record mine in my own, like I'll get like the voice note on my phone. And I'll like say what I like, because I'll have like several thoughts that I'm practicing in different areas. I'll record them. So like I'll say the thought and then I'll leave enough time for me to say it again, but I don't. So what I'll do is I'll record it. And then like when I'm out walking my dogs, I'll play it back. So it's like me saying the thought and then time for me to repeat it. Me saying a thought, time for me to repeat it. Or like when I do morning journaling, one of the things I used to do in my morning journal was one page would be like, I would write over and over the thoughts that I wanted to practice. Because again, we're trying to create those new like pathways. And if I've been thinking something negative for 30 years, 20 years, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, a woman who is a dietitian and an intuitive eating counselor. And she was talking about the 10 principles of intuitive eating. And she was asking people like, how long have you been dieting? And, it was 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 60 years. So if you think about, depending on how old you are, if you've been for decades of your life thinking these negative thoughts, if you really want to see those shifts, you have to consistently. So it's like, I have to consistently practice the thoughts, or I have to consistently walk to the ocean or walk to the pool without my towel, even at the times when I really don't want to, because it's like, oh, I just ate a burger and I feel like extra gross and I want to hide. Like that consistently pushing ourselves gently outside of our comfort zones.
That's so awesome. Consistency. That's like the secret, right? It's that consistency. And when we start to veer off, we know we can just come back to it. So our thoughts determine our feelings, determine our actions, determine our results. And to start, I love that kind of the big picture, almost like a train, getting the train moving and it's just that little tiny push of the baby affirmations and then recording it so we can keep the consistency. And for me, that's a really huge thing because it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. Thoughts, feelings, blah, 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 blah. It's where my brain goes, but in a bad way, blah, blah, blah. Cause it's the whole, I think I know it, but you don't, you need to. So having that, actionable step of the affirmations and recording it, that's something else that I know is so powerful, like listening to it over and over again. So thank you so much for all of your insight. Any closing thoughts that we didn't touch upon for helping our body image and working out that shame?
I think the biggest thing is just really cultivating your environment. And so this can be your social media feed. It can be, learning more about, if you're somebody who's like, oh, I want to be in a smaller body because I equate that with health or I equate that with acceptance, like digging into some of the resources and people who can, kind of show you that like you can make positive, healthy choices right now. Like you don't have to wait until you look different or you feel different to start living your life. And also just thinking about the people that you have around you. I know sometimes it can be hard if you're surrounded with people who also struggle with body image and you're trying to make changes. I've had that experience where I've been in a situation where people are talking about their bodies and I'm just sitting there uncomfortably thinking, I have no desire to participate in this conversation. And I think it's okay to not participate in the conversation, or if you're comfortable to even say, I don't really like having conversations about losing weight because it's not where my focus is, or I would rather spend my energy talking about something else, or just kind of, I was somebody the other day, they were like, yeah, just, you just change the subject. You just kind of like, okay, great. Like, I'm glad to hear about your diet. So how about that baseball game? It's just because it's been normalized that we hear so much about dieting, or the kind of diet culture things that come up. You don't have to embrace those things. And I would also just say there are a lot of resources and supports out there. Give yourself time and space to explore them. And then I think for me, the biggest thing is just kind of having the ability to bet on yourself. And I feel like this is in all things mindset. Even the things that feel like they are the hardest to achieve are achievable. I think a lot of times we don't achieve them because we put too much on ourselves. It's like, oh, I want to achieve all of these things. And then if I don't achieve them, or I don't move at the speed I want to move, then I'm going to berate myself, or I'm going to beat myself up, or I'm going to assume that I'm a failure. Change is not easy. Like, this is part of what, like, I help people change for a living. And I'm not saying this to deter anybody or to make anybody feel bad. If it were super easy to change, everybody would do it all the time. It's not easy because it's a process. And a lot of times, if we don't see results fast enough, we lose faith in the process. And unfortunately, we sometimes lose faith in ourselves. And I've been in that situation before. So I think if I could leave people with anything, it's, even when you feel like you can't trust the process because it's not working the way you want, trust yourself and just keep trying, and know that, like, nothing is ever going to be perfect. No goal that you ever go after are you going to get from point A to point Z with no stops and no setbacks and no slow periods. Like, I don't feel like that's possible. And yeah, I'm sure there's, like, famous celebrities that people can point to and say, oh, but this person did it. Well, you don't know their life. So I think, to me, it's just about, even when it feels hard to love yourself, remember that, like, that's always an option.
It's always an option.
And sometimes it's just about figuring out how to do that again, and not being afraid to ask for help, because there are a lot of people out there who can help you on your journey. And, like, I know for me, like, I do the work I do because I believe in the power of specifically women to change the world. And I feel like this is a very long-winded, like, final thought, but I just feel like it's so important for people to be open to change, but to realize that it's okay if it takes a while, and if it's okay if it doesn't go the way you think it's going to go.
Becky, thank you so much for your insight and wisdom. And as you said, you are a mindset coach. You deal with all things mindset, not just with body image. And so if someone wants to tap into more of your expertise with mindset, how can they get in touch with you?
I feel like I'm all over social media. They can email me. It's Becky@highergoodcoaching.com, and that's higher with a GH. I run a community on Facebook called the Women's Growth Circle. So it's all things growth, and growth in a positive way, not in a shaming way. That's very important to me. And then I have, obviously Instagram and a Facebook business page, and those are both Higher Good Coaching.
Perfect.
I think
we'll double check it. So thank you so much.
You would think I know. I'm like, I think the Instagram might have some underscores.
Okay,
or something.
That's what the links are for in the show notes. So thank you so much. And I'm excited to make my baby steps and take those baby steps just to start embracing who we are now.
And feel free to reach out if you need support.
Thank
you know how to find me.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, where we explore growth and healing through vulnerable conversation. Our hope is that you feel seen and find tools for growing resiliency and tackling your own growth and healing. Be sure to subscribe and check out the VIPs and other resources at samanthaspittle.com. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.